If you've watched episode 1 of my introduction to pattern making course, you know the reason we do pattern making is to bring our designers' ideas to life, and the output is a pattern. But how do we actually make patterns? What is the pattern making process? Hi, welcome to Pattern Making with Leigh. There are 4 different methods you can use to create patterns, and I'll start this video by giving you a sort of quick overview of each one. Then I'll do a bit of a deep dive and explain to you when I would use each method, which is actually kind of the hard part, knowing when to use which one. So I've written some guidelines, and feel free to take screenshots of those screens too. First up, we have pattern drafting, which is where you draw a pattern from scratch. You can also use flat pattern making, where you adapt a block or existing pattern to create a new pattern. Both drafting and flat pattern making are done in 2D on paper. Then there is draping, where you get some fabric, usually calico or a cheaper version of your final fabric, and create the design by sculpting and manipulating the fabric around the mannequin or dress form and pinning it in place. Once the drape is complete, the fabric is marked, then removed and used to create the pattern. Just a side note, draping isn't just a pattern making technique. Lots of designers like to drape their ideas too, because it lets you be more experimental and sort of see how the fabric's falling. And if you go over to Paris and apply for jobs at top fashion houses, there are actually jobs called 3D designers, where you get to spend a whole day draping ideas. And last but not least, you can copy an existing piece of clothing. Copying clothes is great for making clothes for yourself and you really like the fit of something that you already own. You can just copy the piece and use it as a block or in a pattern to create a new design. But we also use it in the industry quite a lot. This is a jacket that I made while I was working at Alexander McQueen, and it's actually based off an old soldier's uniform that the designer found at Portobello Road markets. And I can explain this. So it's not only fashion trends that we sort of see replica on the runway, we also get kind of stuck in a way of creating patterns too. We create sort of the same look, the same shape, the same silhouettes. So getting a vintage piece or maybe a piece from a different culture or nationality can often be a great way to sort of discover new ways to create shapes and different volumes and different approaches too. And they are the 2 reasons I would copy clothing to create a pattern. Now on to draping, and I usually drape things or get a trial of my pattern on the mannequin at some point. If you've watched my other videos, you know I'm a big fan of pinning my pattern to a mannequin to draft neck and style lines too. Draping is amazing because you can experiment in 3D whilst visualizing what you're doing, and if your mannequin or dress form fits your sample size, you can also work out any fit issues too. So that's when I use draping, when the design is experimental and I have no idea how to draft on paper, or when I want to visualize what I'm doing. Perhaps I'm unsure of how much volume to add, how the fabric will fall, or even the shape of a collar. And if your mannequin is the correct size, you'll be able to work out any fit issues while you drape too, so the pattern fits perfectly. Plus, you can avoid drafting. Drafting patterns in 2D can seem very confusing and technical, but if you drape, you don't need to worry about any of that. You can drape the fabric, mark it, then remove it from the mannequin, trace around it, and voila, you have your pattern. Okay, it's a bit more complicated than that, but there is no map. I've done a whole video on mastering art draping you can check out too. From a professional's perspective, it can be a good idea to work and drape on the mannequin as well. When I was creating patterns at Jenny Packham and Alexander McQueen, while I may have started with flat pattern making, I always ended up on the mannequin so I could invite the designer down and to check it out and sign off before I created my pattern. And if you're working as a freelance pattern maker, that could be a really good idea too. So you can take a photo of what you're working on and then send it to the designer so they can sign off before you have to make your pattern. Flat pattern making, or the internet is now called pattern hacking, is when you use an existing pattern or block as a base to create a new pattern for a new design. I've done a whole video on pattern hacking which you can check out, and it's a really great, friendly, easy way to start pattern making. And it makes sense to use this method when you have a block you can use as a base. This will save you time as you already have a good fit and silhouette worked out. Or, even better, you have an existing pattern that is close to the design you're working on. This will save you even more time. If you're not sure what a block is, don't worry, I'll explain in the next video. But if you are interested in this method, make sure to check out my DIY pattern making kits. They are the ultimate pattern hacking tool. As someone who's both taught and studied pattern making, I know that pattern drafting is the focus of most pattern making courses. But in reality, in the industry, we don't actually start from scratch each time. If we can, we'll use a block or an existing pattern as the base to create a pattern for a new design. And this may kind of seem like cheating, but designers actually want you to do this because it saves you time and them therefore money. Plus we know the pattern works. People have bought it, the customers like it, and it's already been fitted, which takes a long time. Having said that, I do usually draft sleeves and collars from scratch. Just because their design is often quite unique and they're attached to an opening on the body or opening on the pattern that is likely to change, often the armhole and neckline are quite unique for each design. So you could fiddle around with a block and adjust it to fit the new opening size, but I find it easy to start from scratch. I've done a whole video on how to draft any sleeve, which you can check out too. So there are the 4 methods. I've done a video on each method so you can learn more and watch those too. Now let's talk about blocks. And if you know what blocks are or you've heard about them in fashion school, I wouldn't skip this video because I'm going to tell you how we use them in the industry, and it's quite different from what you learn at fashion school. Plus at the end I'll share some real life examples of how I used blocks to create patterns while I was working at Alexander McQueen.